In the deep shadows of history, back in an age that was defined by faith and an overwhelming sense of fear, a really strange affliction took hold of Europe. This wasn't a plague of the body, it was something that seemed to seize the very soul. This is the story of what they called the Devil's Dance.
And that's really the central mystery here. Could entire towns really fall under some kind of spell, dancing until they literally dropped? Was this the work of the devil, which is what they so fervently believed? Or was the reality actually something born of the mind? And in a way, was that somehow even more terrifying? So for nearly 300 years, this phenomenon would just erupt, seemingly without warning. It's a period we've now come to call the era of the dancing mania, or choreomania. And you have to understand, this wasn't an isolated incident. It was a recurring nightmare that haunted an entire continent.
To really get this, we have to try and look at these events the way people at the time experienced them, not as some historical curiosity, but as a real and present terror, an epidemic that just seemed to defy all logic.
The sheer scale of this is, well, it's hard to wrap your head around. Across several centuries, reports from that time suggest that tens of thousands of people were affected. We're talking about groups of dozens, sometimes hundreds, and in some cases even thousands at a time, all seemingly losing complete control of their own bodies. Let's just walk through the timeline of some of the most infamous outbreaks. It really kicks off in 1374 in Aachen, in the Holy Roman Empire, and it spreads like wildfire. Then we see it pop up again in 1428, where a monk is said to have literally danced himself to death. And of course, there's the most famous case of all in Strasbourg in 1518, where one woman started dancing and ended up pulling hundreds of people into this frenzy with her. This wasn't just a one-off thing. I mean, well into the 17th century, people would make an annual trip to the chapel of St. Vitus to engage in this kind of manic, almost desperate dancing.
Okay, so what did this possession actually look like? What were people witnessing that made them so certain that demons were walking among them? The first-hand accounts are, frankly, both bizarre and deeply unsettling. The symptoms people reported were, well, they were all over the place and profoundly disturbing. And this went way beyond just dancing. People would move uncontrollably for days, sometimes weeks on end, until they just collapsed from exhaustion. They had violent convulsions, what we might call pseudo-seizures today. Some were heard speaking in languages they'd never learned. There were reports of obscene gestures, of people parading around naked in the streets, even acting like animals. And woven through all of it were these terrifying visions, hallucinations, and this absolute unshakable conviction that they were in the grip of demonic forces.
And you know, this whole phenomenon had a very clear gendered component. Medieval thinking held that the female body was physically different from a man's. It was seen as more porous, more malleable. Now, this wasn't just simple misogyny. This was their actual medical and spiritual understanding of the world. And it meant that women were seen as fundamentally more vulnerable to being invaded by spirits, both the good ones and the bad ones. This belief had very real consequences. Convents, these closed communities of women living under immense spiritual and psychological pressure, they became total hotbeds for these kinds of outbreaks. We have actual historical accounts of nuns who would suddenly just start biting one another, of massed convulsions that would spread from one sister to the next like a contagion. The very places that were meant to be sanctuaries from evil became stages for its alleged work. But this wasn't just random chaos. Possession could actually become a really powerful political and religious tool. Take this one specific case from 1566. A 16-year-old French woman, Nicole Aubry, claimed she was possessed. Now, this was right in the middle of the wars of religion, and her demon, well, it conveniently identified itself as Beelzebub, the Prince of the Huguenots, the Protestants. So her very public exorcism, where the demon was driven out by the Catholic Holy Eucharist, was trumpeted as a miracle. It was proof that God was on the Catholic side. And this is absolutely crucial. These events did not happen in a vacuum. To have any hope of understanding them, we have to try and put ourselves in the medieval world. A world that was, in so many ways, perfectly engineered for this kind of psychological contagion to take hold.
Let's just break down the pressures of that world for a second. First, you've got the Black Death, which had just ripped through Europe, killing up to half the population. So death was a constant, visible part of everyday life. Then you add in widespread famine and brutal winters, which created this desperate poverty. On top of all that, you have this fiery, demon-fearing theology, an overwhelming daily fear of hell and eternal damnation. And finally, there's this growing resentment towards a very wealthy church that seemed totally disconnected from all the suffering. It was a pressure cooker of stress.
Yeah, and this quote really gets to the heart of it all. I mean, when your world is just filled with suffering you can't explain, plague, famine, death, and you have no scientific framework to make sense of it, what do you turn to? You have faith, you have demons, you have saints. Every single event, good or bad, was seen through this one incredibly powerful lens.
So now, let's take a step out of that medieval mindset and put on our modern one. How do historians and psychologists today try to explain what was going on? The answer is just as fascinating, though a whole lot less supernatural.
The leading theory today is something called mass psychogenic illness. You might know it by its older name, mass hysteria. This is a recognized condition where extreme psychological stress in a group actually manifests as real physical symptoms. It's not people faking it. The pain, the convulsions, the exhaustion, it's all real. But the origin isn't a virus or a demon, it's the mind.
When you put them side by side like this, it just highlights this profound shift in our thinking. What the medieval world saw as a curse from a vengeful saint or a literal demonic possession, modern science sees as a collective stress response. A population that was pushed to its absolute psychological breaking point and then expressed that trauma through the only cultural script it knew, the language of religion and the supernatural.
And we can get even more specific. A researcher named Simon Wesley proposed that mass psychogenic illness isn't just one thing. He actually divides it into two types. One is mass anxiety hysteria. You can think of things like fainting spells that spread really fast, usually by line of sight. But these medieval outbreaks, they perfectly fit his second category, mass motor hysteria. The symptoms here are physical, trances, convulsions, dancing. It spreads a bit more slowly, through social networks. And this is the key. It happens in populations where there's already a high level of long-term pre-existing tension. That describes medieval Europe to a T.
Now there is another theory that's worth mentioning, and that's ergotism. It's a type of poisoning that comes from a fungus that grows on damp rye, which was a staple food back then. And ergo can definitely cause muscle spasms, convulsions, and hallucinations. So it probably did play a role in some of these outbreaks, but most historians agree it just doesn't explain everything, especially not the organized dance-like movements and the really complex, socially influenced behaviors people were exhibiting.
So we have a modern diagnosis. We have a scientific name for all this suffering. But does that really just close the book on the devil's dance? The human reality behind that label, that's something we just can't forget.
It's so vital to remember this. Just because we can label this as a psychogenic illness, it doesn't diminish the experience one bit. The symptoms were real. The suffering was absolutely real. These people danced until their feet bled, until they collapsed, and in some cases until they died. Their pain was genuine, whatever the source was.
And that kind of leaves us with one final, pretty unsettling thought. We can explain these events through the lens of trauma and psychology, sure, but as we look back into that world of such profound faith and fear, you just have to ask yourself, have we really explained it all? Or do these strange, lingering shadows from our own past point to mysteries about the human mind and its incredible power that maybe we have yet to fully understand?